Today we are making the diner trouser, an elastic back slim wide leg trouser. You can get this pattern along with all my other patterns at lydianaomi.com or Lydia Naomi on Etsy. To begin, please read through the Read First file. It gives you info on printing, sizing, cut layouts, pattern adjustments, and so much more. Today I am making a size 8 with a cotton chambray, and the seam allowance is included in all of my patterns, and for this one it's a 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters everywhere, except for the hems, which are 2 inches or 5 centimeters. And just a note, all references to right and left sides refer to viewing the pieces in front of you, not to wearing it on yourself. When cutting the front pant leg, be sure to snip the notches at the waist and the hem, and mark through the drill hole at the knee line. And then use a yard or meter stick and draw a line from the center of those waist notches through the drill mark down to the center of the hem notches. And then you're going to fold the pant legs wrong sides together along the center line, matching the notches together at top and bottom, and press in place. Let's prep our pieces so that we can have a smooth workflow. Start by applying the pocket opening facings to the wrong sides of the front pant pieces. Also apply the front pant fly fusible interfacing to the wrong side of the right pant leg. This is the wrong side of the pant, so you're seeing it correctly on the left. Some found it helpful to also include a strip of fusible interfacing on the left side where we will sew our shield. Make this strip no wider than 1/2 inch and make it as long as the other fusible piece, or just make sure it's 1/2 inch longer than where the notch is. Also apply the pocket opening facings to the pocket bags. If you end up using a lighter fabric, you will need a pocket backing, which is piece 12. So you're going to overlock the inner curved edge of the backing and then place it on the good side of the pocket on the edge that has no fusing. And you can stitch close to the edge, about 1/8 or a couple millimeters or so, all the way around, leaving the top unstitched. I mean, you could do it, but it's not really necessary. And then this is the result. You can see the stitching on the wrong side where the fusible is, and when it's actually sewn into the pant, it will appear like this. And you would follow the exact same instructions for applying the pocket bag. Apply fusible interfacing to the wrong sides of the front right and left waistband pieces. You can see here that the center fronts of the waistband are in the center, and this is the same orientation of the pattern. These are the outer pieces that you're going to actually see. It would be very beneficial of you to mark the buttonhole and button so that you know where the center front of these pieces are, because it can get confusing. Flip the top waistbands up and the mirrored piece will get a fold in at 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter along the bottom as shown. Next, pre-fold the back waistband in half lengthwise at the notches, and then on one side, doesn't matter which, fold in the edge at 3/8 or 1 centimeter, and that will be the inner side of the waistband. For the fly facing and shield, I decided to block fuse, so I got a piece of fabric that would fit my 2 pieces and fused it. And then I cut the pieces out. And make sure that you are cutting the fly facing with the good side of the fabric up, like I'm doing, otherwise you'll find you'll have to recut it later. Pre-crease the hem folds of the front and back pants. So first fold at the notches and then fold up 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters along the edge. And be sure to keep the pant crease visible for the next step. On the right side of the front pant, fold the pant at that center line that we marked earlier, and sew from the top to bottom at the 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter notches. Then you can press the crease outward. And I re-crease the hems as well. It's very helpful later when the legs are sewn and you want to sew a crisp hem. Next, we're going to tackle the pockets. So match the angled slants of the pocket bags and the front pant with right sides together and sew together. Trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters and then understitch. And understitching is stitching the seam allowance to the inner construction, so in this case it's the pocket bag, and you're stitching very close to the seam. Fold the pocket bag so that the wrong sides touch the wrong side of the pant leg, and then press the seam. Fold the free edge of the pocket bag at the notch so that the right sides of the pocket bag touch each other and line up along the top and sides of the pant. Pin along the bottom of the pocket bags, and then you're going to sew first, and then you're going to overlock it, and it should look like this. Next, you're going to pin the side and top edges of the pocket bag to the pant, and you're going to sew at about 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters to secure it in place. Next, you're going to overlock the sides and the crotch of the front and back pants. Moving on to the fly construction. I used to struggle a lot with these, but I think I've created a very easy process for you to be able to do it with ease. So to start, you are going to fold the fly shield lengthwise with right sides together and sew along the bottom at 1/2 inch. And as it says on the pattern piece, the bottom is straight across while the top is angled. Then you're going to turn out and overlock the open long side. Also overlock the curved side of the fly facing. And just a little tip, I like to pull the overlock tail to the front and start the stitch cleanly from the sewn end. And it just looks so much better. Place the front pants right sides together and sew between the notches. Be sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. With the right sides of the pants facing up, place the fly facing along the center front of the right side of the pant and pin in place. It may be helpful to draw on the 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter seam allowance, as I have done here, and you're going to sew from the top down, and when you get to the crotch seam, sew right to the crotch seam without catching it in the stitch, and backstitch from there. Next, you're going to turn it out and understitch. And then fold to the inside of the pant and press in place. And you're also going to press the crotch seam open. Now this pattern calls for a 6-inch zipper. I'm using a 7-inch to show you that it's no big deal if you have a longer zipper, as long as that metal zipper stop at the top is out of the way of the seam line so that you don't break a needle. On the left side of the pant, place the zipper along the center front edge, right sides together with the bottom stop just above the notch. Sew with a regular zipper foot at 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter seam allowance. Then you're going to turn it out and just finger press the seam allowance back from the zipper. And from this seam, mark a line 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters over this is where you're going to place the fly facing side of the construction. This is because the actual seam allowance is a 1/2 inch, but we only sewed at a 1/4 inch for the zipper, so we have to make up for it. So we're going to pin that area in place. Then fold back the front pant, and we're going to sew the fly facing to the zipper tape. Once you've finished that, fold the front pant back in place and use the fly top stitch guide, which I cut in some heavier paper, to mark the stitch line over the fly facing side. And you're going to sew from the top, through the pant and facing, and when you get to the crotch seam, you're going to pivot and sew close to the crotch seam, stopping a 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters from the end of the original crotch seam stitch. And as you can see, I'm opening the crotch seam as I stitch here. And you can see here how it should look. You really want to leave that 1/2 inch so we can go back in later and sew the rest of the crotch seam without sewing some kind of pucker because of the top stitch. So make sure that you follow my instructions exactly. Next, unzip the zipper and place the fly shield along the edge of the zipper tape under the zipper. Edge stitch the seam beside the zipper teeth as far as you can stitch toward the crotch seam. An edge stitch is stitching very close to the seam, about a 1/16 of an inch or 1 to 2 millimeters. Once I get near the bottom, I close up the zipper, and then I keep stitching as far as I can to the end. And this is how it should look. Next, we're going to close up the zipper and tack through all layers about 3/8 or 1 centimeter section at the base of the J, just above where it starts to curve. And I like to create a bark tack with a zigzag setting width of 2 and a length of 0.4. But if you don't want to do that, you can just backstitch with a straight stitch. That also works. And this just keeps the fly construction from totally flying open when you unzip it, so it just secures it in place. And now your fly is completely done, and it wasn't that difficult as you thought, was it? Next, we're going to place the back and front pant side seams right sides together, matching the hip, knee, and hem notches, and then you're just going to pin everything in place and sew. Next, we're going to press the seam open from the hem to the base of the pocket bag, and once we get there, you're going to snip the front seam allowance so that the pocket bag seam allowance can lay flat, and just press that area as well. Next, place inseams right sides together and sew. Press open and also take care of those hems as well because we will be sewing them shortly. To finish up the crotch, we're going to place one pant leg inside the other, making sure that they're facing right sides together, and sew the pant crotch from that back stitch on the front to the back waist. And I'm going to reinforce it as well. So I'm just going to pivot once I get to the back waist and sew that same seam again to reinforce it. Next, we're going to sew up the hems, and be careful not to flip the sewn crease to the opposite orientation. I've done that before and it's very annoying to correct neatly, so just keep that in mind. Place your front right waistbands right sides together and your front left waistbands right sides together and sew along the top concave curve. Understitch on the inner side of the waistband that has been pre-folded. And remember, the outer sides are the sides that are the same orientation as the pattern pieces, so make sure that you have that right. Sew the front edges of the waistband right sides together. Then snip out some of the top seam allowance. And just fold the seam allowance in as shown and turn out for a nice, clean, crisp edge. Then press to finish. With the right and left front waistbands open, sew the back waistband to the front right and left front waistbands. Make sure that the folded edges line up, but make sure you don't sew them folded. Sew them completely open. And then press these seams open and refold them. Place the outer side of the waistband along the trouser waist. Start by lining up one of the front seam with the edge of the fly construction, and just go around and pin the side seam, then the center back notch, then the other side seam, and secure the other side of the front waistband as well. Sew from the front waistband seam all the way around and do not sew past the seam into the inner waistband. We're going to do something a little fancy to clean finish these edges. Wrap the inner waistband around to the inside of the pant and kind of bunch up the fly areas to more easily wrap it around and pin it in place just past the fly shield seam and the fly facing edge, and sew these in place. If you used a longer zipper like I did, be sure to trim it before the next step. Then you're going to turn this out, and this is the beautiful, clean result. Now you could skip this step and just stitch in the ditch all the way up to the edge. This is just a cleaner, more satisfying way to finish it, and it's not really that difficult. Next, we're going to finger press the seam allowance towards the waistband. And if you're using a thicker fabric, you can trim the waistband seam allowance to reduce bulk. And then along the back, place the inner folded edge of the waistband just over the sew line so that we can stitch in the ditch from the right side. And we're just pinning the back section of the waistband in place. And then I'm basting it with a contrast thread. I don't know why I thought green would be a nice contrast, but at least I could still see it. And we're going to start at one of the waist seams with a back stitch, and then stitch in the ditch, catching the inner fold, and then stop at the other waist seam with another back stitch. And of course, if you do this with matching thread, you won't even see this stitch at all, and that's the beauty of a stitch in the ditch. Next, we are going to feed through our beloved elastic, and you can use the Notion chart for reference on its length, and that's in the Read First file. To calculate this for yourself, you want to find half of your waist measurement. So say your waist is 28, half of that is 14, and then you're going to reduce it by 1 to 2 inches or 2.5 to 5 centimeters. And I like to do 2 inches. I like it just a little more snug. So I definitely recommend pinning your elastic in place. It should be a 1/2 inch past each seam. And then try on the pant and fasten the front with a pin. And just see if you like the tightness of the elastic. So once you've established the length, you want to pin the ends of the elastic a 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters past the waistband side seam, and sew back and forth across the elastic on the outer waistband side seams to secure. So we're going to stitch right in the middle of that seam, and using a similar color thread is of course going to look way better than what I'm doing here. Pin the remaining front sections of the waistband just over the seam lines. I just left it pinned from the outside because it is a smaller section, but you could definitely baste it in place if that makes it easier for you. It is very easy to sometimes miss the fold on the back when you're stitching in the ditch, so definitely if this is your first time or you're not super familiar with this, definitely just baste it. Better safe than sorry. And here we have a beautiful waistband ready for the button. To mark the button and buttonhole, use the marker and fold back the left side at the center line. And then you're going to place the right side to the right side of the pant waistband and mark the buttonhole. You can do the same for the other side or mark the button placement through the buttonhole once we sew it. And this buttonhole is for a 3/4 inch or 19mm width button. And your buttonhole should be 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters wide. The buttonhole is always about 1/8 to 1/4 inch bigger, so you're going to sew your buttonhole on the right side of the waistband. Then I like to mark the buttonhole placement through the end of your buttonhole and apply your button. I like to use a quadruple thread to make the sewing of my button so much faster. And that is the diner trouser complete. Be sure to share your make with me on Instagram with #dinertrouser and tag me at Lydia Naomi Studio so that I can see it.